In just 4 days at the time of this video's upload, it will be the 3rd anniversary of the day pop culture changed forever. The day the world stood still. The day where we all came together to celebrate the release of Pikmin 4. And absolutely nothing else. Do you really need me to reiterate to you how huge Barbenheimer was? It's arguably the defining moment of pop culture in the 2020s. In a year where a lot of major films were flopping at the box office, 2 movies, both with huge but wildly different audiences, released on the same day, and what came after was nothing short of a cultural phenomenon. These films were everywhere, particularly Barbie with all the merchandise and brand collaborations it released during the summer. People went in droves to see them in the cinema, most making double features out of it and seeing them both on the same day. They both experienced joint success at the box office, and both went on to win numerous awards, with Oppenheimer even sweeping the Oscars and taking home Best Picture. All because of the special relationship between the 2 films, created by the public's interest in them, and the novelty of seeing them together despite them seeming completely different on the surface. Since that fateful 2023 summer, plenty of companies and fan bases have tried recreating the Barbenheimer phenomenon whenever 2 popular films have released on the same day, with campaigns including the likes of Glickid, Gar Furiosa, Doomsday, f***ing Saw Patrol, but none of them have come even close to recreating half of what Barbenheimer was able to achieve. And I think that's because there was an authenticity and novelty to the original movement that just can't be replicated again, at least not in the near future. The question is though, outside of the event and their relation to each other, are they actually good movies? Did they deserve their success and acclaim? Or are they overrated and only as fondly remembered as they are because of the hype Barbenheimer generated? That is the question I want to answer today. In this video, we're going to re-examine and review both Barbie and Oppenheimer separately in the wake of their 3rd anniversary, to decide whether they're actually good or not, and which of the 2 films is better. To start with, why don't we cover the Barbie movie first, since it is after all the first half of the Barbenheimer name. From what I can remember about my first viewing of the film over 2 years ago now, I liked it well enough, but did consider it to have a number of flaws that held it back. Let's see if my opinion on the film has improved upon this rewatch, and start actually talking about it. Barbie is a weird movie. On the one hand, there are a lot of things in it that I genuinely really like and consider to be great. But on the other hand, I also have so many nitpicks with it that make it a film with quite a few rough edges for me. These nitpicks don't ruin the film for me by any means, and I'd still say that I enjoyed the movie quite a bit, but they are certainly noticeable and detract from the overall experience. And I'd like to run through a few of these negatives to start this review off. Firstly, one of the biggest issues in the film is the dialogue. It is simply not very good, and the primary reason why is that most of it doesn't sound natural at all. Most of the characters don't talk like real people, which I can excuse for characters like Barbie and Ken since they are supposed to be naive dolls who don't know much about human society. But this problem extends to the human characters too, which is a problem because unnatural sounding dialogue is really distracting, even in films with light tones like this one. That's not even mentioning how a lot of the messaging conveyed through the dialogue is incredibly hand-fisted and on the nose, with a few scenes even including characters just straight up telling the audience directly what the message of the film is, without any room for them to pick up on it themselves. Don't get me wrong, I understand that maybe this unsubtlety was an intentional choice on the part of the filmmakers, as they had an important message they wanted to convey and didn't want anyone watching to miss it. But that doesn't change the fact that having such in-your-face dialogue makes Barbie as a movie worse, even if I do strongly agree with said message and think it does need promoting more. Secondly, I found the film editing to be really clunky. It's hard to really describe what about it bugs me without just showing you clips of the film, but if you've seen the movie before, you might be able to understand what I'm saying. One of the strangest displays of editing happens around the middle of the film, when Barbie's being chased by those Mattel executives, and the song Speed Drive starts playing. It goes on for a few minutes, but when the chase gets interrupted, it expectedly comes to an end. But then, when the chase resumes a few minutes later, the same song starts playing again, not from where it left off, but from the beginning again. I have never seen something like this happen in a film before, and it felt quite jarring and even a little unprofessional. Thirdly, the film's visuals are a bit inconsistent. In the scenes set in Barbie Land, the film actually looks fairly nice and has a unique visual style, but the scenes set in the real world, on the other hand, look pretty bland and washed out. It's a shame, because the film's director, Greta Gerwig, has previously directed films like Lady Bird and Little Women that I think look amazing, and it's hard not to think that this movie is a visual downgrade compared to them. By the way, if you haven't seen 2019's Little Women before, please watch it after this video. It's unironically a 10 out of 10 film. Finally, and this is probably the nitpickiest nitpick out of all the nitpicks I've shared, but I really don't like the mother and daughter characters in this. They're both underwritten, with the most rushed character arcs in the film, and probably the worst dialogue in the film too. I also don't think their relationship as a mother and daughter was very convincing, and I'm really not sure why America Ferrera was nominated for an Oscar for this role. She's good for what the film asks of her, but Oscar-worthy are not words I'd use to describe the performance. In fact, I can probably say that about all the performances from this film that were considered for awards, as well as most of the film's award nominations in general. Now, given how I've been complaining about it for a while, you might have gotten the impression that I don't like this movie that much, and I can see why. In reality though, that actually couldn't be further from the truth. Even though it has a lot of weird flaws that hold it back, as I've already mentioned, I still really like the Barbie movie, and think it's a good film. And that's because for every problem I have with it, there are at least 2 other things I like about it. For instance, 3 aspects of the film I completely understand getting award recognition are the production design, costume design, and makeup and hairstyling. I don't think anyone can argue they aren't great, particularly the production design. The practical sets in Barbie Land translate the designs of the dollhouses and playsets they're based on perfectly, and they look fantastic. I also love how the film tackles Barbie as a concept. I'm honestly shocked that such a meta-exploration of the character was allowed under the guise of Mattel themselves, who are probably very selective and protective of Barbie's image behind closed doors. The movie delves into how Barbie can be seen as a source of empowerment for women by representing all the amazing types of women in the world that they can aspire to be like, but also simultaneously a physical manifestation of the unrealistic standards women have to live up to, promoting the idea of needing to be constantly perfect at all times, which is a really interesting dichotomy to explore, and it explores it quite well in my opinion. I also like how they use this concept to further explore the unrealistic expectations of women in society as a whole. In an age where the world, and particularly the corporations in it, who are represented quite well in this film by the Mattel executives we meet halfway through, claim to champion progressivism and inclusion, under the surface, women still face adversity in the form of constant pressure to be always flawless and present themselves in an impeccable fashion, which can understandably be incredibly difficult and draining for them. The film shows this effectively throughout the runtime, and in the process, also demonstrates sufficiently how women can reject these bullshit standards, empower themselves, and embrace who they are, including all of their supposed quote-unquote imperfections. Which is a really great message to leave the audience with, especially since a lot of them are probably young women and girls who are just coming into their own and could do with a message like that. The main Barbie we follow throughout the film also goes through a solid character arc too, which again ties into the message of the movie. She learns to accept that she's enough and that she doesn't need to be quote-unquote perfect at all times, to stand up to those who try and push her around, and ultimately chooses to forge her own path as a human at the end without the Barbie image to try and figure herself out, demonstrating her growth from the beginning to the end of the film. Ironically though, the best written character in the film is probably Ken, funnily enough. He's a really good depiction of a certain type of man we've seen pop up a lot more over the past few years. That being someone who's been conditioned by societal structure to need constant validation and attention from other men and women to feel secure about himself as a man. A desire which in the process makes him become attracted to the idea of patriarchy, where men are validated uncritically for the mere virtue of being male. He feels he's owed this pedestal that society has placed in front of him, and so begins a well-written descent into incel-like behavior, blaming women for all of his problems and trying to enforce rules onto them and take away their liberty, all in service of elevating himself. Despite his attempts to enforce his own petty, man-childish rendition of the patriarchy though, he soon realizes his problems haven't magically vanished overnight, as he still feels incredibly insecure about what the other Kens and Barbies think of him, especially when the main Barbie he's after still doesn't just mindlessly give him affection because of who he is. and he sort of has a bit of a breakdown. Ultimately though, he eventually finds the light at the end of the tunnel after some guidance from the Barbies, and through some bonding with the other Kens in one of the greatest musical scenes/accomplishments ever created by mankind. He accepts that what he did was wrong, and he finally realizes that he is his own individual that doesn't need the validation of others to be enough for himself. It's overall a really good character arc. To top everything off, the movie has some really funny jokes up its sleeve too. Not every joke lands, but the ones that do really work for me. Overall, the Barbie movie has no shortage of issues, as we've already discussed, but despite that, it manages to remain good due to its many positive attributes that counterbalance its rough edges. It might be a little overrated in my opinion, but a 7 out of 10 film like this is still a really fun watch at the end of the day. Now it's time to review the other half of Barbenheimer. And before I do, I want to let you guys in on a little secret about me. There's a specific reason that I wanted to make a video about this topic. It's not just because of its 3-year anniversary, and it's not just because I enjoyed the phenomenon a lot. You see, Barbenheimer is particularly special and significant to me, because Oppenheimer is one of the most important films ever released for me personally. Usually I save the score I'd give the movie until the end of the review, but I'm just gonna say it right now up front. This movie is a 10 out of 10 for me. Not only do I think it's a masterpiece of a film, it's also an incredibly foundational movie for me, and its impact on me cannot be understated. I feel like every cinephile has that one movie that really made them look at cinema differently. The film that made them obsessed with movies, and for me, this was that. This was my cinephile awakening. I watched it in the cinema back when it opened, and it absolutely blew me away. And since then, movies have become one of, if not my biggest passion. This movie is the reason I critically view films now. It's the reason I've now started posting film-related videos on a channel that used to be exclusively about Minecraft. It's the reason I'm considering pursuing a career in filmmaking. It's the reason why last year I watched 200 movies in the span of only 12 months like any completely normal, sane, and healthy person would do. All in all, this is a really important and special film for me, and as a result, it's a little difficult for me to talk about it in the same vein as Barbie or some of the other stuff I've covered on this channel, but I'm gonna try my best. There's a lot of reasons why I think this film is one of the best movies ever made. First of all, can we just talk about this face, and this one, and this one, and the many more throughout the film, that are all the result of an incredible lead performance by Cillian Murphy. This has got to be one of the best acting performances in the last decade. Portraying Oppenheimer throughout the various significant stages of his life, Murphy excels at conveying each and every emotion the character is feeling at a particular moment through a mostly monotone voice and a wide range of facial expressions. The cockiness, the arrogance, the stress, the shame, the grief, the guilt, the horror, the numbness. It's all on display and easily recognizable by a simple glance at his face. It's a truly amazing display of acting, and it's no wonder why he won an Oscar for it. Oppenheimer's character is also incredibly compelling in this movie. On my most recent viewing of the film, it occurred to me that one of the best things about the way the film is written is that while in theory you learn more about him throughout the film than you knew before, it also simultaneously feels like you truly know him less, as your preconceived are consistently challenged by what's presented on the screen. It's hard to know what the man's true views and thoughts are at any given moment. Is he really haunted by the guilt of creating the most dangerous weapon in the world? Or is it all a facade? Is his opposition to the creation of the hydrogen bomb some moral quest to make up for what he's done? Or is it all just for attention? It's stuff like this that makes you question every little action or line of dialogue from him, which makes him feel all the more like a really layered and complex protagonist, with multiple layers of psyche to unravel. His transformation throughout the film is also worthy of praise too. There's no mistaking the arrogant yet still brilliant scientist we see at the beginning of the film, to the shell of himself he becomes later on. He's truly one of the best written protagonists I've seen in any film, and he's also joined by a great supporting cast of other compelling characters. There's a few notable characters here I could talk about, like Leslie Groves, Kitty, Jean Totlock, or Edward Teller, but the obvious standout here is very clearly the film's primary antagonist, Lewis Strauss. Played excellently by Robert Downey Jr., he works as a great form of narrative opposition to Oppenheimer himself. Both men are driven by their ego in one way or another, but Strauss is much pettier and more vindictive by nature, and this resentment towards Oppenheimer for something largely fabricated within his own head is ultimately what leads to his downfall, making him a compelling villain for this story. Speaking of which, what a story this is. It's thematically rich on so many different levels, and it's paced so well, especially since the film is 3 hours long. I love how this movie is written, almost as much as I love how well made the movie is on a technical level. The score by Ludwig Göransson is straight up one of my favourite film scores of all time. The editing is brilliant, sharp, and has such a rhythm to it. The cinematography is so expertly crafted. The sound design is surprisingly good for a Christopher Nolan film. And speaking of him, his direction here is excellent. When watching the film, you can really tell that this is made by someone who spent decades crafting and perfecting their style to be at the top of their game. And it shows. The film flows so well because of it. On top of everything else, I'm pleased to report that I have no real significant issues with the film. It's genuinely a near-perfect film for me. It'll always be one of, if not my favourite movie, it'll always be incredibly important to me in my life, and it'll always be deserving of that 10 out of 10 score. It's the primary reason I remember Barbenheimer so fondly, because without it, I may have never been introduced to this absolute masterpiece of a film. I think it's fair to say that the publicity both of these films got thanks to the Barbenheimer trend was completely deserved in hindsight. Although I much prefer Oppenheimer to Barbie and think that it's the significantly better film of the two, both of them are good films in their own right, and they both helped inspire one of the greatest film phenomenons in recent memory. Not only was it incredibly impactful on people like me, it was also just a really fun event that brought people together to talk about and watch films, in a time where the future of cinema wasn't looking great. Its success will never be replicated again, and although that might seem like a shame on the surface, it just makes this pivotal moment in pop culture all the more special. More importantly though, I'm sure that these two films will be talked about for decades to come, even outside of the context of Barbenheimer, because they're good enough to stand on their own as some great and impactful pieces of cinema. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and dropping a comment telling me about your thoughts on Barbie and Oppenheimer. Also consider subscribing to my channel if you want to see more videos about my random interests in the future. For now though, thank you all so much for watching.